same striking features: dark eyes, high cheekbones, and hair that shimmered like liquid silver. She was the picture of calm, but there was an underlying curiosity in her gaze. The way she studied him was both gentle and intense. The human warrior's pulse quickened as he took in their presence. Where was he? How had he survived the crash? What were they doing here? The last thing he remembered was the impact, his ship torn apart in space, the explosion sending him tumbling to a strange world. But now he found himself lying in a foreign chamber, surrounded by beings who seemed to possess both grace and power. The taller figure, the one who appeared to be in charge, noticed his movement and slowly leaned forward. Her voice was calm, measured, and yet it carried an undeniable authority. "You are awake," she said, her words soft yet piercing the silence. "How do you feel?" The human warrior struggled to sit up, finally managing to push himself into a sitting position. The room spun for a moment, and he had to steady himself. "Where am I?" His voice sounded strange, rasping from disuse. The woman beside him, the one who had not spoken, looked at him with a look that was both understanding and distant. She said nothing, simply watching as he regained his bearings. "You are safe," the taller figure replied, her gaze steady. "You are in my care, and in my kingdom."
The word sent a shock through him. Kingdom?
That word alone was enough to confuse him. The language he understood, but the context was unclear. He scanned the room again, noting the technology around him. This was no ordinary place. This was no ordinary medical bay. His mind raced. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice stronger now. "And where is this place?" "I am the Queen," she said simply, her eyes never leaving his. "And this is my realm. You were brought here after your ship crashed. We found you among the wreckage." The human warrior's eyes widened as he tried to remember the events leading to this moment. His ship had been hit. He had ejected just before impact. But how had they found him? How had he survived? His mind struggled to make sense of it all. You saved me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Queen nodded, her expression unreadable. "We did what we could. We had to make sure you lived. You were the only survivor." The words hung heavy in the air. The only survivor. He remembered the faces of the crew, the terror in their eyes as the explosion tore through their ship. He was the only one left. He could feel the weight of it. His chest tightened. He had failed them. "You are not alone," the Queen continued, breaking through his dark thoughts. "You are here for a reason, and in time you will understand why. But for now, rest. You are safe." He nodded, though he didn't fully trust her words. There was something in the way she spoke, something that hinted at deeper motives. His instincts told him that everything here was more complicated than it appeared. But for now, his body was too weak to argue, too tired to push further. The exhaustion that clung to him was overwhelming. He sank back into the bed, his body finally giving in to the comfort of the soft sheets. The Queen and her daughter remained beside him, their eyes never leaving him. The silence between them was heavy, but there was something soothing about it as well. For the first time since he had crash-landed on this strange world, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance he could survive here. Maybe he could find a way to get back to his people. But for now, he would rest. He would trust these strangers who had saved him. The Queen's gaze lingered for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. The daughter beside her shifted slightly, her eyes softening for a brief second before returning to their watchful position.
"You are not the first to come here," the Queen added, her voice low.
"But you are the first of your kind." The words struck him like a blow. The words struck him like a blow. What did she mean by that? He tried to sit up again, but his body protested. The Queen's hand came to rest gently on his shoulder, guiding him back down. "For now, rest," she repeated. "The answers will come in time. We will speak more later." The warrior closed his eyes, his mind racing with questions he could not yet answer. What had he gotten himself into? What was this place? And who were these two figures who seemed to hold the fate of his survival in their hands? As sleep finally overcame him, the last thing he saw before drifting off was the quiet, watchful eyes of the alien queen and her daughter. They had saved him, but he knew there was more to this story than he could understand in this moment. For now, he could only rest and wait for the answers to come. The human warrior woke to the sound of quiet voices. For a moment, he wasn't sure where he was. The surroundings were still unfamiliar, the strange yet comforting atmosphere of the alien world pressing in on him. He turned his head slightly and saw the same two figures, the queen and her daughter, still seated nearby. This time, they were engaged in a soft conversation, though he couldn't make out the words. Their language was foreign, full of unfamiliar sounds that seemed to flow like music, though there was a serious tone to it. As he lay there, he felt a strange sense of being watched. The feeling wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if the weight of their gaze was a constant presence, steady and protective. He shifted slightly, noticing the stiffness in his limbs, but the pain that had plagued him earlier had faded. His head still ached, but it was a dull throb now, like the after-effects of a long, exhausting battle. His thoughts were clearer than they had been when he first woke, and he found himself wondering about the events that had brought him here. His eyes rested on the queen. She sat with her back straight, her eyes closed as though deep in thought. The daughter, beside her, had her hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze never straying far from the human warrior. There was a tension between them, an unspoken understanding that whatever was happening, it was important, and it was clear that he was at the center of it all. The warrior tried to sit up, but the movement was slow, deliberate. He wasn't entirely sure he was strong enough yet. As he shifted again, the queen opened her eyes and turned toward him. Her expression softened slightly, though her eyes still held that quiet authority. "You're awake again," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of someone who had seen much in her long life. "How do you feel?" He cleared his throat before answering, his voice still rough from disuse. "Better, I think." "Not great, but better." She nodded, then gestured for her daughter to rise. The younger woman stood gracefully, her movements fluid and smooth. She looked at the warrior, her eyes soft but observant. There was an unspoken connection between them, an understanding that neither had yet fully explored, but it was there, lingering in the silence. "You have been through much," the queen said, her voice steady and strong. "But your journey is far from over. I've brought you here for a reason." The words hung in the air. The warrior felt a tightness in his chest. He had known there was more to the story, but hearing the queen's confirmation made it real. He was here for a purpose beyond simply surviving. He had no idea what that might be, but he had a feeling it was important. "What reason?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why me?" The queen's gaze was sharp, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Pity? Sympathy? It was hard to tell. "Your species has much to offer," she replied, her voice low, yet carrying the weight of a lifetime of experience. "You have skills, strength, and resilience, qualities that my people could use. But more than that, you have something unique, something that no other species in the galaxy possesses." The warrior frowned, trying to make sense of her words. He had never considered himself special, just a soldier, someone who fought because it was his duty. But these aliens, this queen, seemed to think he was more than that. "What do you mean? What is it I have?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. The queen glanced at her daughter before answering. "Your bloodline is not like any other."
You are a bridge between my people and yours. a symbol of unity in a time when both our worlds need it the most.
The warrior stared at her, unsure of what she was implying. A bridge?
Unity? The word sounded grand, but he couldn't understand why he, of all people, would be the key.
His only concern had been getting back home. He had never thought of himself as a leader, certainly not someone who could bring two different worlds together. "I don't understand," he muttered, shaking his head. "I'm just a soldier. I don't know anything about unity or politics or whatever you're asking of me." The Queen's gaze softened slightly. "I do not ask for you to understand everything at once. You will be shown what is needed, but first you must heal. You must gain strength, not just for your body, but for your mind. The task ahead is not a simple one. The war between my people and the invaders has taken its toll. We are on the brink of losing everything. But you—" She stopped herself, her gaze turning inward for a moment. "You are our last hope." The word struck him like a physical blow. His heart raced, and his breath caught in his chest. Last hope? He had been prepared for anything, but this was more than he could have imagined. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice trembling slightly with disbelief. "I'm just one man." "How could I possibly be the key to saving your entire kingdom?" The Queen's expression was unreadable. "It is not about being just one man," she said slowly. "It is about what you represent. You represent the strength of your species, the potential for something greater. We, the people of my realm, have suffered for too long. We need someone who can bring together those who would otherwise never unite. Someone who can unite different worlds, different lives, different cultures." The daughter stepped forward now, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "You are the one who can do this," she said, her eyes meeting his. Wow! The warrior felt something stir inside him. It wasn't hope, not yet, but something else. Maybe it was a sense of responsibility. Maybe it was something deeper, something that had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. He wasn't sure, but for the first time since he woke up on this strange world, he felt something other than confusion and fear. The Queen turned her attention back to him. "There is a great deal at stake, and you must decide what role you will play in the coming days. Will you fight for us? For this world? Or will you return to your own and abandon the galaxy to its fate?" The warrior knew that whatever decision he made, it would be one that changed everything. But he was still unsure. Was he really the answer? Could he really bring about unity between his world and theirs? He had no idea, but the thought of failure weighed heavily on his heart.
"You'll have time to think," the Queen said gently, sensing his hesitation.
"Rest now. When you are ready, we will begin." The warrior nodded slowly, trying to process everything. His mind raced, and his thoughts felt like they were too big for him to hold. He was the last hope. That was too much to carry, wasn't it? The daughter smiled at him softly. "You are not alone," she said quietly. "You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." He looked at her, and then at the Queen, the weight of the decision pressing on his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He was in this now, whether he liked it or not. And so, for the moment, he closed his eyes and allowed the quiet to fill his mind. The warrior had time to think, time to make a decision. But as he drifted back to sleep, he knew that when he woke, the choice would be clearer. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The warrior had spent the majority of his time resting, trying to regain some semblance of strength. The Queen and her daughter were never far from his side, though they didn't pressure him to speak or act before he was ready. They simply observed, giving him the space he needed to process everything. It was both a blessing and a curse. While he appreciated the quiet, the constant presence of the two women, only made him more aware of the weight of the situation. They were waiting for him to make a decision, and that pressure was starting to settle deep in his bones. On the third day after his awakening, the queen finally approached him with a sense of purpose. Her steps were quiet, but there was a determination in her movements. The warrior had seen it before in the eyes of soldiers who knew that the battle was imminent. The time for rest was over. "I think you are ready," the queen said, her voice measured and firm. He looked up at her, still unsure. "Ready for what?" he asked, the confusion evident in his voice. He wasn't even sure what he was supposed to be ready for. The trials, the task she had mentioned before? His mind was still clouded with questions, and each new answer only seemed to bring more.
"To prove your worth," she said, her eyes steady.
"To prove that you can fulfill the role I have asked of you." The warrior's gaze shifted to the daughter, who was standing quietly by the door. She had been watching him closely ever since his arrival, her presence always gentle but filled with an intensity he couldn't ignore. She nodded at him, a small, encouraging smile playing at the corners of her lips. It was clear she believed in him, though he had done nothing yet to earn that trust.
Prove myself? He echoed, sitting up straighter. What exactly do you want me to do? You will undergo a series of tests, the queen explained, her voice calm and unwavering.
They are designed to assess not just your physical strength, but your mind and your heart. The future of this realm, and by extension, the future of your world, depends on whether or not you can complete them. You must be able to lead, to inspire, and to fight with both wisdom and strength. These trials will determine whether you are truly the one we have been waiting for. The warrior felt a chill run through him. These tests sounded unlike anything he had ever faced. His life had been filled with battles, survival, and harsh decisions. But the stakes were different now. This wasn't just about him. This was about two worlds, and possibly the fate of both. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," he said, his voice uncertain. The queen studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing, as if she could see the doubts swirling in his mind. "You are the only one who can decide that," she replied, her voice softer now, but no less commanding. "No one else will carry this burden for you, but you are not alone. You will have the support of my people and of my daughter." She turned to her daughter, who stepped forward with a quiet nod. "All we ask is that you try," the daughter added, her voice gentle but full of conviction. "We believe you can do this, but only you can take the first step." The warrior looked at both of them, the weight of their belief pressing down on him. He didn't feel like the hero they saw in him. He wasn't ready for this. But deep down, he knew there was no other choice. He had to try. He had no idea what the tests would involve, but running away wasn't an option. He had to prove something, not just to them, but to himself. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady, though doubt still lingered.
"I'll do it." The queen gave a small nod of approval, then turned toward the door. "Follow me," she commanded.
The warrior hesitated for only a moment before swinging his legs off the bed and standing. His legs were stiff, and his head swam for a moment, but he quickly regained his balance. The queen led him down a series of corridors, the walls lined with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly as they passed. The technology here was advanced beyond anything he had seen on Earth. But there was a beauty to it that felt almost organic. They came to a large chamber, its high ceiling supported by pillars of smooth, dark stone. In the center of the room was a platform, surrounded by strange glowing circles that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. The warrior could feel the energy in the room, as though it were alive, humming in the air. "This is where you will begin," the queen said. "The trials will take place here, and they will test every aspect of who you are. If you are to lead, you must be able to endure everything we ask of you. Do you understand?" He nodded, though his heart was pounding in his chest. He had no idea what to expect, but the very atmosphere of the room made it clear that these trials were not something to take lightly. The queen stepped aside, allowing the warrior to approach the platform. First, you will be tested on your strength and endurance. You must prove that you are capable of withstanding the physical demands of what we ask. Only then will we move on to the other tests. The trials will begin as soon as you step onto the platform. The warrior took a deep breath and stepped forward. As his foot made contact with the glowing circle, a sudden surge of energy coursed through him. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, as though the platform was scanning him, reading his every muscle, his every nerve. He tried to steady himself, but the energy was overwhelming. It took everything he had not to collapse under the sensation. Seconds passed, though they felt like an eternity. Finally, the energy subsided, and he was left standing there, panting, trying to regain his composure. He looked up at the queen, who was watching him intently. "You have passed the first trial," she said, her voice soft but with a note of approval. "But this is only the beginning." He exhaled sharply, grateful that the first trial was over, though he knew there were many more to come. The queen and her daughter exchanged a brief look, their eyes filled with anticipation, and the warrior knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The second trial would test his mind. He would be asked to solve puzzles and strategize, to think beyond what his physical strength alone could accomplish. He had always prided himself on his tactical skills, but this would be different. The stakes were higher, and he would need to think faster, more creatively. The pressure was mounting. The third trial would test his heart. He would be forced to make difficult choices that would affect not just his fate, but the fate of others. This would be the most difficult trial of all, and he wasn't sure if he was ready. But he couldn't turn back now. He had committed to this path, and now there was no other choice. He would face whatever challenges came his way. For better or worse, he was in this fight until the end. "Are you ready for the next trial?" the queen asked, her voice steady, almost expectant. He looked at her, then at the daughter, who smiled reassuringly. The warrior nodded, a sense of determination rising within him. "I'm ready," he said, his voice stronger now. He had no idea what the trials would bring, but he was no longer afraid. He had to succeed. For them, for his people, and for the future that lay ahead. The trials had begun, and each one felt more difficult than the last. The warrior could feel his body and mind being pushed to their limits. The queen had watched him closely during each challenge, her expression unreadable. But the way she observed him seemed to show both pride and expectation. He could tell that the stakes were higher than he had initially understood. The first trial had been a test of strength and endurance. He had been forced to complete a series of physically demanding tasks, lifting enormous weights, running for hours through challenging terrain, and enduring obstacles that pushed him to the brink of exhaustion. His body had screamed in protest, but he had kept moving, refusing to give up. The energy he had felt during the trial had been overwhelming, but somehow he had managed to keep his balance and finish. Afterward, he had been given little time to rest before the second trial began. This trial had tested his mind. He had been placed in a room filled with intricate puzzles, ancient riddles, and devices designed to challenge his intellect. It had been an entirely different kind of strain. His brain felt like it was burning, struggling to connect the dots between the cryptic symbols and complex systems. But just when he thought he couldn't take any more, he had figured it out, solving the puzzles one by one. Each time he succeeded, it felt like a small victory, and though it was exhausting, the sense of accomplishment kept him moving forward. Now, as he stood in the final room, he knew this trial would be unlike the others. This was not about physical strength, and it wasn't about intelligence. This trial would test his heart. He had been placed in a large, open space. No walls, no barriers, just endless sky. The ground was soft beneath his feet, but there was something unsettling about the open space. The air felt different here, charged with anticipation. The queen and her daughter stood nearby, watching him silently. They were waiting for him to make his decision. A voice echoed in the vastness of the room. It was not a voice he had heard before, but it was clear, as if spoken directly into his mind. "You have done well so far," the voice said. "But now the true test begins. This trial will ask you to make a choice that will decide not only your fate, but the fate of others." The warrior's heart raced. What did it mean? His mind immediately started to race with possibilities. What choice could they possibly ask him to make that would affect so much? The voice continued, "You must decide who will live and who will die. There are two paths before you. One path leads to the survival of your people. The other leads to the survival of this world. You may save them both, or you may save only one. The choice is yours." The warrior blinked, trying to process the weight of the words. It was as if time itself had stopped for a moment. He turned to the queen and her daughter, but their faces remained neutral, offering no clues. They stood silently, as if awaiting his decision. He swallowed hard, feeling the pressure building in his chest. How could he choose between two worlds? How could anyone make such a decision? He had always been a soldier, trained to fight and survive, but he had never been asked to decide who would live or die. This was different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was something much deeper, something that reached to the very core of what it meant to be human. "Why do I have to choose?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly.
"Why can't I save both?"
The voice did not answer directly, but the silence that followed was enough. The answer was clear. He could not save both. He had to make a choice. The warrior closed his eyes, trying to block out the pressure of the situation. His mind flashed to his people, his comrades, his family, his friends. He had come to this world as a soldier, a survivor, but now he was being asked to make the ultimate decision. And yet he couldn't help but think of the people who had already sacrificed so much. What if they had died for nothing? What if the survival of one world meant the end of the other? The more he thought, the more the weight of the decision pressed down on him. There was no easy answer. He couldn't choose between his people and this world. He cared for both. He could see the beauty in the alien world, its peaceful landscapes, its powerful people. But he could never forget the people of Earth, the people who had trained him, fought alongside him, and trusted him with their lives. Took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He had to think. He had to do something. "I cannot choose between them," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I won't choose." The silence that followed was deafening. The voice in his mind didn't respond, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The queen and her daughter remained silent, watching him intently. Then, slowly, the queen stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You have passed the trial," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It is not always about making a choice between two worlds. Sometimes the true test is finding a way to save both." The warrior blinked, surprised. "But how?" he asked. "You said I had to choose."
"You were not meant to choose between them," the queen explained, her voice softening. "This trial was not about forcing you to make an impossible decision."
It was about testing your heart, testing your capacity to see beyond the immediate. Sometimes there is a third option, an option that neither side could have imagined on their own. You have shown that you are capable of that. You will find a way to bring both worlds together to ensure their survival. And in time, you will prove that it is possible to unite them. The warrior stood there, still trying to process the queen's words. He had expected the trial to end in some kind of final decision, but instead, he had been shown that there was always another way. He wasn't being asked to sacrifice one world for the other. He was being asked to bring them together. You have done well, the Queen continued. And I believe you are ready to lead. Ready to bring about the change this galaxy needs. The warrior took a deep breath, still feeling the weight of everything he had just experienced. He wasn't sure he was ready. He had never been a leader, but the Queen's words stayed with him. He had passed the trials, not because of his strength or his intellect, but because of his heart. He had shown that he was capable of seeing a way forward, even when it seemed impossible. For the first time since waking up on this alien world, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose, of clarity. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something more. He could be the bridge between these two worlds. He could be the one to unite them, to make sure that no one had to choose between their survival. The daughter stepped forward, her eyes warm and proud. You did it, she said softly.
You proved that we were right to believe in you. The warrior looked at her, then at the Queen.